A very warm welcome to all of you for to come at a point where I think everybody is unbelievably busy. It's great to see a broad range of staff from within the group, also a good number of representatives from the executive director's offices. It's great to have you all here. I think we have a fascinating hour and a half in front of us, and it's my great pleasure to introduce to you one of the world's leading thinkers and practitioners in the field of agriculture, food security, and hunger and nutrition. Is there anyone in this room who doesn't know who is sitting here at the front? Can you raise your hand? See, that saves me the total introduction. It's a great pleasure to introduce to you Tom Arnold, who has been influential in what the Irish government has been doing over many years in the field of agriculture, food security, and nutrition, and is the CEO, leader of Concern International, the largest, I believe, Irish NGO in that field. He has influenced this field not only domestically in Ireland, but also in Europe and actually broadly around the world. He's been in many panels, UN related, and the scientific community, the development community, so he's one of our heroes. He's a very good friend over the last few years. He has been partly responsible for the fact that we at the World Bank are now really incorporating nutrition into our next agricultural action plan going forward from 2012, 2013 to 2015. We have set ourselves a goal that going forward, everything we do in agriculture, we will look at it through the lens of nutrition as well. Doesn't mean every project will have a nutrition component, but every team will ask those questions and will do whatever they can to make sure that that is an essential part of the analysis and going forward. Without further ado, Tom. No, actually, hold on. Yes. We have a word from the executive director in charge of Ireland, and then Niall will also say a few words. Please.
All right, thank you very much, Jürgen. First of all, thank you and to your team for organizing this really interesting event. As executive director representing Canada, Ireland, and the Caribbean, I want to say that we put a lot of emphasis on food security and nutrition issues, and it's very much in this context that I think that this session today is both really critical for the bank and critical to us as we think our way forward in this very important area. Secondly, I wanted to have a chance, specifically as ED representing Ireland, to say what a pleasure it is to have you here, Tom. I've had the chance to have a number of conversations with you in the past, and you are one of the most inspiring people I've heard on the subject. So I'm absolutely delighted at this time where Ireland is also presiding the EU, that you are able to make your way here. You've been a tremendous voice globally on food security, hunger, combating hunger and poverty. So, and I'm sure we're going to hear a word or two about what you're going to do next, but I'm sure that you will never stop being that very strong voice. So before I turn it over to Niall, who will speak as one of my two wonderful Irish representatives in my office, let me just offer you my very best wishes for the future, and thank you for all that you've done at Concern over the last several years. Thank you, Tom. Niall?
Yeah. Thank you, Mary-Lucy. Well, as Mary-Lucy said there, and firstly, most of you will notice, but Ireland actually has the rotating presidency of the EU for the next 6 months. That's lots of work for myself, and particularly Eamon, the senior Irish advisor in our constituency, but also our Canadian and Caribbean colleagues. But more than anything, it also offers an opportunity for us to highlight some of the work done by Irish organisations and individuals. And in that regard, we're delighted to facilitate this event here today between Concern and the AES and the Secure Nutrition Platform. So thanks to AES and the platform for hosting the event, and of course for meeting our immediate food security needs a little bit earlier. But I particularly want to thank Jürgen and also Yuri, Rosalie, Julie and Monica, who've undertaken a huge amount of work behind the scenes to ensure the success of this event. As Mary-Lucy said as well, food security is a cornerstone of Irish Aid's approach to development, and Tom, I think, will touch on this in his presentation, but I just want to highlight one key event which will take place during the presidency. It's a major conference in Dublin on the 15th and 16th of April in conjunction with the Mary Robinson Foundation on climate justice, nutrition and food security. Also, being a small country, of course, allows a real coherence between what the government does and actually what the NGOs do. So a lot of the stuff you'll hear from Tom and Connell here is very much the same approach as Irish Aid takes. For instance, with the RAIN project, I know Irish Aid are involved in funding it. And particularly on research on the ground, Irish Aid highlights that a dual approach to agricultural innovation is important. So it's evidence-based research, but also a drive to bring this to a higher level in policy fora. So for instance, one example is the keyhole gardens in Lesotho, which are now being driven out. I think there's 25,000 of them being funded, and they're going to be targeting 100,000 people. And the methodology is now being applied to South Africa, Mozambique, Sudan, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And similarly, Irish Aid works on biofortification, particularly the community-based approach in Ethiopia and Mozambique and Malawi. And this addresses the high vitamin A deficits that we see. It's being addressed through orange flesh potato, for example. Finally, I'm mainly up here to pay tribute to Tom, and I'm biased from this regard because I previously worked directly with him as researcher, as did Colin Andrews from the social protection side in HDN. But although in my whole 3 years with Tom, I'm not sure I actually told him anything he didn't know already. So, but he'll be embarrassed that I bring this up, but he has just been appointed by the government to a very honourable position. He's going to chair the Constitutional Convention. So it's a huge honour for Tom, and as Irish citizens we can be comforted that such an important piece of work will be in the hands of such a capable operator. However, as Connell will probably say, it's a sad time for Concern to be losing somebody of his intelligence, his ability and his energy, and as his successor will find out, they've got very, very big shoes to fill. And although he'll be lost to Concern on a day-to-day basis, we hope that he won't be lost to the development sector in Ireland and internationally, and that he'll continue to champion the issues which he has forged so well, food security and nutrition. So with that, I'll hand back to Jürgen.
Thank you. Without further ado, Tom, the floor is yours. We have two commentators following his presentation, which I will introduce after his speech.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and great to see so many familiar faces. I have a presentation, and I'll be sharing it with my colleague Connell Foley, who's head of part of our Concern worldwide division called Strategy, Advocacy and Learning. That's the part of our organisation that we try and learn from what we're doing and apply that learning both ourselves and more widely. Could I just reiterate the thanks that Niall has said to all of the people who has contributed to organising today. Now, this is what I want to, this is the basic structure of what the talk have. Speaking about Ireland's and Concerned worldwide leading role in hunger and food security. Brief word on Concern and the Sun movement, because I think this is a significant international development which we think has enormous potential. And then I'll hand over to Connell, and he'll give examples of these 4 specific programs that or models that we're testing at the moment, which I think will connect with you. And then at the back of the room, as you leave, you will find this document. The document concerns innovation in the 21st century. This is, if you like, a range of the things we're doing over and above what we'll be talking about today, and some final words. Probably some of you, at least in this room, don't know the background of Concern, so maybe I'll just briefly start there. Concern started in 1968 in response to a famine in Biafra in eastern Nigeria, and really has grown since then. We currently work in 25 countries. We have, if you like, fundraising and policy operations in Ireland, the US, and the UK. Our budget last year was probably something over $200 million, and we employ 3,500 people. They're, in a nutshell, what we do. But I did want to start with talking about Ireland's and Concern's role, because I think, as Niall said, the connection that Ireland has had with this is very important, and the leadership role that Ireland has taken over the last number of years has been very important internationally. Because, you know, as perhaps might be expected, hunger has always been a long-standing priority in Ireland's aid programme. But in a way, a crucial moment came in 2008 when the government had set up what they called a hunger task force. It really led on a bit from the Millennium Project Hunger Task Force, which had reported in 2004. But this hunger task force, I was on it, and it met for about a year and came up with a report with 3 very clear recommendations as to how Ireland could play an important role. That it should focus its attention on African smallholder productivity, and particular focus on women. That it should give nutrition a central piece in its own aid programme. And then critically, that Ireland should play a role as a global advocate against hunger. And that has been, in a sense, the basis upon which government policy in Ireland has consisted over the last number of years. And it has been very important. There's a thread of continuity in Irish policy from the government who adopted that report and its successor, the current government, have really made this very important. And one of the manifestations of this was in September 2010, when the Irish and the US government committed to providing international leadership on the Sun. Hillary Clinton and the then Irish Foreign Minister, Micheál Martin. And then it has further extended into the presidency, as Niall mentioned. And there are a number of critical, if you like, opportunities during the Irish presidency where I think the government can play a really important role. That the mention that the April meeting that Niall mentioned on hunger, nutrition and climate justice. In May, the Irish government will preside over a meeting of the foreign ministers, the European foreign ministers, which will adopt an EU food security package, which is really implementing a policy decision taken a couple of years ago, but is putting the practical implementation dimensions to it. But then critically important, adopting a communication on nutrition. And the significance of this is that this is the first time that Europe and the European Commission has a policy framework for nutrition. And it's potentially something really important and of real relevance, I think, to the whole international drive towards this. And then obviously in September, there is the UN meeting on the successor to the MDGs. So what does all this add up to? About 6 or 7 years ago, I suggested in a speech that Ireland should be the Norway for hunger. That Ireland should play the same type of leadership role about hunger that Norway plays in regard to conflict. It's a very simple idea. And I think in a way, this is what has, over the last number of years, this is what the Irish government has actually largely done. I want to talk about the role of the World Bank, because I think it's very important to acknowledge the contribution of the bank. And particularly, I want to talk about Mira. She's going to be embarrassed about this, but truth, you can't hide the truth. I think the document in 2005, the bank's document, repositioning nutrition as central to development, was crucial. And the first time I met Mira was in the World Food Prize in 2003, and she was doing her best to make sure that this idea got into the report of the Millennium Project Hunger Task Force. But then, just in case it did or it didn't, this document emerged later on. And when you put that with the Lancet series in 2008, that becomes, if you like, the intellectual foundation for policy and politics in the meantime. Very, very important. The bank's report in 2008 on recognising the importance of agriculture. And then I think And it is important to acknowledge the bank's response to the food price crisis in 2008 onwards, I think, has been commendable. And I think the leadership that was given by the President Zellick and Jürgen have played a critical role in this, has been very important. And now, of course, the Secure Nutrition Knowledge Platform has been there. We're very glad the Concern is part of that. And now, as Jürgen referred to, the new Agricultural Action Plan, which I gather is coming down the tracks. So Concern as an innovator and leader, this is what the basic thing that I want to talk about. I've already said when we started, where we work. For the past 10 years, I think we really have managed to, in addition to our normal work and dealing with emergencies and nutrition and health and education, we really have attempted to have a sustained focus on the treatment and prevention of acute malnutrition, stunting, and food security. On the treatment of severe malnutrition, we were the pioneers of what was called community therapeutic care, which was adopted in 2007 by the UN as community management of acute malnutrition. We're very proud of that contribution. But we also then acknowledge that really there has to be a shift towards prevention. That is the key now, and that's the key thrust of our policy and our policy efforts going on. About 6 years ago, we looked at where we were going as an organization, and we decided that our next strategic plan should be about what we call the 3 I's: innovation, influence, and impact. If we could innovate and learn from that innovation, we could begin to influence policy, and then our total impact would be a combination of the work we are already doing on the ground and the secondary level of change that changed policy would bring about. We have been from the very beginning a strong supporter of the Sun movement from its establishment in April 2010, and we've been involved in various high-level advocacy groups. I'm on the lead group of the Sun, and happy to continue, and we have here with us Jennifer Thompson, who deals with hunger advocacy in Concern, who is on the working group, or one of the task force dealing with civil society. And as I said, that we have a document there to leave with you, dealing with innovation. This is really, again, just very briefly, what we've been doing in terms of the Sun. We inputted into the whole development of the thinking about it. We have co-hosted a number of important international meetings, one in 2011 along with Bread for the World, a side event there in last April, last May, in fact, at which President Obama was involved, and then the civil society, that meeting with UNICEF in September. And we are also we also at a level of operational level, we have a number of Sun-related activities in our different countries, and we have internal systems in place to really try and learn from these and bring that learning back into the higher level advocacy at global level. Now, I'm going to stop here, because what I said, our document here, this document tells us the range of things that we're doing, which we regard as innovative and relevant. But we want to talk about 4 particular models which we are testing out in different circumstances. And Connell is going to speak about these. And this shows you a nice, while we're changing the speaking order, this is South Sudan. Thank you very much. I'll be back at the end.
Do you want to give me that?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I suppose if I could just give a couple of slides of background. I mean, Thomas talked about the history of Concern, but it's important to recognize we have a humanitarian mandate. It's actually part of our identity. So traditionally, 50% of our work has been on emergencies. That brings with it a very action-orientated culture, as you can imagine. And it has been quite a shift to try and change people's attitudes and the way we work as an organization. It kind of builds on this work David Corton did around the generations of NGOs, where you start with relief emergency response. You see immediately you can't keep giving inputs. You then start working in community development, trying to build up self-help among people. After a while, you see the limitations of that. You start working on institutional development, strengthening health systems, education systems, etc. And in the end, he suggests you get to global people's movements. I don't think we're quite there yet. But it does, I think we go through this, we've gone through this whole continuum, if you like, although we keep
we keep going back to each of those roles. But we do have to ask ourselves now, what's our added value to development? I mean, traditionally we would have seen ourselves as just service deliverers. And I think, you know, other big NGOs see themselves as mobilizing poor people, building institutions of the poor, and then letting people speak for themselves. And we do a lot of that. But, you know, we're also implementing evidence-based solutions. I think that's an important change for us, is that as we are delivering services, we're actually looking to build on the evidence that's out there. You know, the stuff that is derived from the World Bank, from IFPRI and other agencies like that. But I think what's really important is this whole idea of contributing to global knowledge base. This wasn't on our radar, I'd say, before Tom joined us, and he talked about these 3 I's: innovation, impact, and influence. We recognize that to be influential, we need to generate decent knowledge, rigorous knowledge. And I think that's been a huge change for us. A lot of people who've gone to see concern programs in the field have always said, they're fantastic, they look brilliant, but you don't have the documentation or the evidence to prove it. And I think that's a very telling point. I see it as so much waste of good learning and knowledge. We do incredibly interesting work on the ground, and yet we're not good at documenting it. I think that's a very traditional NGO shortcoming. So I think one of the things we're looking at the moment is how do we produce knowledge and learning that's of use to governments, multilaterals, and basically the general global development community. We've been doing pilots that are derived from our own thinking, but we're not asking ourselves, who's going to pick up these pilots and what kinds of questions they have? What are the answers we need to give them that will be useful for them? So I think asking the right questions becomes really important, and I'll talk about that in particular in relation to one of the models in a while. So what I'm going to talk about is just this investment in producing convincing evidence. We're not doing this everywhere, let's be honest about this. We're 4 or 5 high-level programs that we really want to do at a rigorous level. We have a whole range of programs across 25 countries that are continuing as normal, if you like. Because high-level research is expensive. I mean, when I talk about RAIN, you'll see we work with IFPRI. It's very expensive to do very large sample size baselines and then end lines, and you're not going to do it everywhere. Basically, we get public money to deliver public goods. So we can't just spend it all on research. So what we are moving towards, obviously, then is this action research approach to work, and I think that's been a big change for us, and a very exciting one, I would say. So I'm going to talk about 4 different models. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of each of them. Most of you would know about this one already, Realigning Agriculture to Improve Nutrition in Zambia. It's supported by Irish Aid, the Kerry Group, which is private sector, IFPRI, who are very much helped us to design the program and have been involved in the baseline and will be in the end line. It's a 5-year program, basically, from 2011 to 2015. We're obviously working with the government of Zambia and with local NGOs as well as part of it. We're working with about 3,500 households that have pregnant lactating women, children under 2 years. It is about prevention of stunting, so it is focused on the 1,000 days. We do have control group and intervention areas, and I'll explain those a little bit now in a second. So the purpose, basically, and I think this is really important, and people don't often think about this in relation to this program, it's to develop a sustainable model that integrates and realigns agriculture and nutrition and health interventions, and basically those can be replicated. So in a sense, you've got the 2 objectives of reducing stunting, but also realigning and integrating activities and mechanisms through the 2 ministries, and that's a big challenge. And I think then what we're trying to do is to get evidence that we can share globally then on how that will work. It's not. I think most of you are probably familiar with the program already. I mean, it is a mixture of agriculture and health and nutrition intervention, so behaviour change on nutrition, looking at kitchen gardens, dietary diversity, the usual stuff. Looking at women's empowerment, obviously, in terms of the utilisation of foods. But we're investing quite a lot in the sectoral coordination and alignment. And I think that's probably the most distinctive contribution this programme will bring, is how do you get a Ministry of Agriculture and a Ministry of Health to work together? And I'm hoping that we will have a decent paper at the end of the year on how that is going, but I'll give you just a sense of it now in a second. My technical advisors like to say, we've done a baseline, our end line is going to happen in 2015, we don't have anything to say in between. I don't think that's good enough. We do need to be generating evidence probably on an annual basis. what's been exciting about it, I think, is this whole alignment of the ministries. And we have set up agriculture and health committees at district level. And I know when we talked about this in terms of the design, we recognised that we would need to influence at national level, but we would also need to have a more implementation mirror group at ward level. That's actually, we've been doing this for about the last 9-10 months, and it's actually going very well. Scott Drimmie, who used to work with IFPRI and is now at the University of Stellenbosch, has been working with this EU process model based on Peter Singe's work. And I think it seems to be becoming very effective. It sounds like the ward level committees are becoming very effective. They're actually finding the budgets within their own, and they're agreeing plans, and they really seem to be working together very well. It's not integration, it never will be, but it is cooperation, coordination, and alignment, and that's what's important. It's also stimulated great interest at national level. I think that's really interesting for us, is that if you can get something to work at district level, people will take notice of it at national level, and that seems to be happening, and there seems to be quite an inspired chair working on it as well. At the moment, we're doing very useful barrier analysis. I mean, it's sort of a follow-up to the formative research, and we're looking at behaviour changes. And in fact, some very interesting things are coming out about that. In terms of really what are the barriers to people utilising food, what are the barriers to dietary diversity during pregnancy, to people being involved in community groups, etc., etc. And there are a lot of cultural impediments that we're going to have to break down. We're finding that there are impediments based on religion that we're needed to break down. Apparently there's a religious group there who feel that we're doing the work of the devil because we arrive on red motorbikes. So we're also planning annual surveys on dietary diversity, and we're looking at a cost of diet research this year as well. What's also very interesting is that IFPRI are doing a process evaluation, which I think is really interesting. So at the end of it, we should also be able to say why things worked. And they're kind of looking at, well, what are the obstacles and changes that are made during implementation that are going to shed a light on how particularly ministries work together. I think that's a very exciting part of the programme. So that's a basic overview of RAIN. The second big program we're investing in, which is a really exciting one, is this community resilience to acute malnutrition. And it's quite a topical one, I know. The background to this, in a way, came from our work in northern Kenya in 2009-2010. In Moyale district there in the top, you'll see it just in the little bend on the top there, we started a whole package of interventions aiming to provide resilience to drought. Basically, there was 3 or 4 years of drought in that area out of 7, and we recognized that there was going to be a big problem with hunger. When you look at the stats on the left, the GAM rates on the left, you'll see that Moyale's was pretty bad, but if you look at the nutrition surveys on the right, you'll see that Moyale stayed very stable. If you look at the figures, we recognized that the GAM rates and SAM rates did not spike in Moyale, and it was the only district or in that whole region that didn't happen in. Now, we're fairly sure that was down to our interventions and the fact that we've been doing this whole package of interventions, but we didn't have the evidence to prove it. We didn't invest in the baseline and then in the end line to do that. And so what we decided was we would try to do the same thing in another country, but invest in a proper baseline and end line. And unfortunately for us, I think in some ways that the only country that put its hands up to do this, and partly because of the countries we were funding through Irish Aid funding, was Chad, which is a very, very difficult environment to work in. The model is basically around a package to build community resilience, but we're also recognizing that, 1 year in 3 or so, there is going to be an emergency, there is going to be a bad drought, and there's going to be a crisis. So the question becomes, how do you build resilience while having early warning and early action at the same time, recognizing there's going to be a crisis every couple of years? And so this is what we're trying to do with the program. Basically, again, it's a package of interventions. So there's improved agricultural production, diversification of livelihoods. There's access to and use of high-quality health and nutrition services, increased participation of women, and then work on the WASH side. So in terms of the detail, these are all the kinds of detailed interventions that we're going to do in the east of Chad, designed, again, to create a more resilient community to drought and the normal hazards in that part of the world. If I just explain this graph to you, it'll give you a sense of what we're trying to do. The purple line is a normal year. So if you look from the start of the year right through to the end, people have enough food after hunger, the malnutrition rates are reasonably okay, and then as the hunger season comes along, they start to spike. And in a normal year, I suppose they don't exceed emergency thresholds. And on a bad year, that's the red one in the control area, if there's a drought, you get a big spike of malnutrition, and you see you have a problem for about 20 weeks or so. What we're trying to do in the treatment area is to make sure that it doesn't spike so much, that the interventions will create resilience so you don't get this spike of SAM and GAM rates, and that it will be very easy for people to recover afterwards, which is essentially the essence of resilience. And that's what we're trying to do with the program. If I go on to a third model, this one is around surge capacity in health systems. Again, most NGOs and people like the bank and donors are all about strengthening health systems. We recognize that in doing this, it's a long, slow process, and particularly at a local level. But that again, if you have spikes in particular caseloads, it could be diarrhea, it could be a particular disease like cholera, it could be, again, malnutrition rates, that there is a need for external support. What you don't want to do is just focus on those and forget about your normal ongoing health system strengthening efforts. So again, what we're trying to do is look to see how can we support health systems to deal with these spikes in particular diseases without undermining the efforts of the health system strengthening efforts. So very much like the resilience model in many ways. We've come up with a model which is really to strengthen the capacity of government health systems to effectively manage increased caseloads during predictable emergencies without undermining the ongoing system strengthening efforts. And the model really looks like we're doing risk analysis, so basically looking at what are the drivers of risk, what are the drivers of increased caseloads, setting